Most men believe women remember the flowers, the dates, the expensive dinners. They don't. They forget the gifts. They forget the moments you tried too hard to impress. What they never forget is how you carried yourself when life pressed you. They never forget the man who stood rooted like stone when the world shook. A woman may forget your words, but she never forgets your presence. She never forgets whether your energy was calm or chaotic, whether you were led by emotion or whether you led yourself with discipline. Presence burns itself into memory far more deeply than gifts ever could. The truth is simple. Women are not drawn to a man's possessions. They are drawn to his state, his frame, his composure, his ability to remain centered when others collapse. This is not just romance, it's evolutionary. For thousands of years, the survival of the tribe depended on the few men who did not lose their heads when danger approached. Think about it. A man who panicked in the face of threat could not protect. A man who folded under stress could not lead. That same primal instinct still lives in women today. They may not consciously explain it, but they feel it. And they never forget the man who radiates that rare calmness. Stoicism is not about shutting off emotions. It's about mastering them. It's about being the eye of the storm, the still center that doesn't flinch when thunder cracks. A woman never forgets the man who refuses to be controlled by chaos. Let me tell you a story. Two men lose their jobs on the same day. One shouts, curses, spirals into blame and despair. The other takes a deep breath, accepts reality, and calmly makes a plan. Both men face the same hardship. One shows weakness, the other shows composure. Which man do you think she remembers? She remembers the one who did not lose himself. She remembers the man whose energy she could lean on, because women never forget the feeling of safety. It isn't about money, muscles, or charm. It's about whether you are the kind of man who makes her nervous system exhale. Here is the first truth. A woman never forgets a man who can stay calm when others cannot. When you stand tall in the storm, you imprint something deeper than attraction. You imprint security. The second truth is this. Women never forget a man who chooses silence over noise. Most men rush to speak, to defend, to argue, to prove. But a man who can pause, hold eye contact, and stay unmoved by provocation, that man is remembered. Silence is not weakness, it's power. It shows you do not need to prove, you already are, already. Women are not wired to admire constant reaction. They remember the man who listens deeply, speaks little, but when he does speak, his words cut sharp and true. She forgets the chatter of boys. She never forgets the presence of a man who carries weight in his silence. Third truth, women never forget a man who is mission-driven. If your purpose bends for her, she will forget you. If your purpose is larger than her, she will remember you forever. A man anchored in mission is unforgettable because he doesn't orbit around a woman. He moves toward a horizon only he can see, and she feels that pull. This is why Stoicism teaches, control what is within, release what is not. When you live for your own code, you stand apart. You become a reference point in her mind. Not the man who chased, begged, or bent, but the man who walked with clarity of direction. Let's be brutally honest. Women test men, often without realizing it. They test to see if your frame is real. They throw storms of emotion, small criticisms, moments of tension. Not because they hate you, but because they want to know. Can you withstand? Will you crumble? Or will you remain unshaken? And here's the counterintuitive truth. It is not perfection they remember. It is endurance, it is steadiness. You don't need to be flawless. You need to be rooted. Because a woman never forgets the man who did not abandon himself under pressure. Another thing women never forget, restraint. Every man is quick to desire, to chase, to indulge. But the man who practices restraint, who doesn't need constant validation, who can withhold and wait, that man is different. In a world of indulgence, his self-control is magnetic. It signals mastery. It signals strength. Restraint is not denial, it's discipline. When you show a woman you are not a slave to your impulses, you separate yourself from the crowd. She may forget the man who flattered her, but she never forgets the man who did not worship her, who valued himself enough to remain selective. Another unforgettable trait, accountability. A man who blames circumstances fades from memory, but a man who takes full responsibility for his path, who owns his choices, he stands out. Women respect the weight of ownership. They remember the man who says, "This is mine to carry," instead of pointing fingers. Let's return to the core, Stoicism. It's not about showing no feeling. It's about being the master of your inner kingdom. When you command yourself, you become impossible to ignore. Women may not always stay, they may not always choose you, but they will never forget the impression of your mastery. Consider this: power does not shout. True power whispers. When you walk into a room without the need to dominate, without the need for approval, but with unshakable calm, people notice. Women notice. They may not say it, but they feel it, and they don't forget it. Women never forget the man who embodies consistency. Anyone can be strong for a day. Few can be strong for years. Consistency is rare. It means your words and actions match. It means your energy today feels the same tomorrow. Inconsistency erodes memory. Consistency builds legacy. Another truth: women never forget the man who keeps his dignity under rejection. Most men collapse, lash out, or beg when denied. But the man who bows his head, smiles, and keeps walking, that man leaves a lasting mark. Because dignity in loss is rarer than pride in victory. Here's something deeper. Women never forget the man who teaches through example, not through preaching, not through constant advice, but through quiet demonstration. When you live your philosophy rather than speaking it, you become etched into memory. She may forget the words you spoke, but she never forgets the standard you embodied. It comes down to this: women remember strength, not spectacle. They remember composure, not chaos. They remember presence, not performance. So ask yourself, are you living in such a way that your presence lingers? Do you radiate calmness? Do you hold silence with weight? Do you walk with mission, restraint, accountability, consistency? Because these are the traits that etch you into memory. The world will tell you women want excitement, gifts, and romance. And yes, those things play their part. But beneath the surface, they seek something deeper. The man who is unshaken. The man who embodies the timeless virtues of Stoicism. And here's the paradox. When you live this way, you don't do it for women. You do it for yourself. You do it because mastery of self is the highest calling of a man. Women never forget it because it is rare. But you embody it because it is who you are. A woman will forget the man who tried to impress her. She will forget the man who gave her the world, but could not govern himself. She will never forget the man who could stand alone, calm, rooted, unmoved. That is the man who endures. That is the man who becomes more than a memory. He becomes a standard. So the choice is yours. Do you want to be remembered as one more man in the crowd, or as the one who stood still when others fell apart? Because women never forget the man who carries himself with calm power, the man who walks with clarity of mission, the man who governs himself first. Be that man, not for her, for you, for the discipline that makes you unshakable, for the presence that makes you unforgettable. And if this shifted something in you, if it reminded you of your own power, write this in the comments: I control my focus. Because in the end, that's what separates the forgettable from the unforgettable. The man who masters his focus, and through it, himself.